Have you ever felt so tired that you have no emotions left, but you can't pinpoint the reason? There are days when you still smile, still talk, still get everything done as usual, but inside you feel terrifyingly empty. You may not have thought about it, but many people are living like that, a life that is okay on the outside, but in reality they are struggling with old wounds that have never been named. There are pains that don't scream. They don't show up in tears, don't cause obvious crises. They transform silently. There are pains that become silence. There are pains that turn into personality, into habits, into invisible armor. And the most heartbreaking thing is almost no one notices. Instead of understanding, people often judge. Instead of listening, people demand. But the truth is that every behavior, every strange reaction of a person has a reason. Every time you withdraw, every time you brace yourself to be strong, it's not by chance. Carl Jung once said, "When pain is not understood, it comes back in the form of behavior." And that is why in this video, you will explore with me the 13 most profound characteristics of souls who have suffered serious trauma in their lives. Traits that seem to be just personality traits are actually traces of memories. And most importantly, you will learn how to transform those wounds from dull pain to awareness, from survival reflex to freedom of choice. I do not tell you these things so that you can label yourself or someone else. The purpose is not to label someone as traumatized. The purpose is for you to start looking with new eyes, looking at yourself and those around you, not with doubt or disappointment, but with understanding, with a very simple question: what happened in the past that made this person become this way? And if during this video you feel a lump in your throat or a sudden urge to breathe more deeply, don't be surprised. That's when your soul recognizes something familiar. Maybe you see yourself in each of these traits. Maybe you'll remember a loved one, a friend, an ex, someone you suddenly understand a lot better after hearing this. Whoever it is, the most important thing to remember is this: no behavior is without a reason. No one becomes cold, controlling, or closed off just because of personality. Everything has consequences. Everything has a story. We're not born to be defensive, but some people learn that too early. They learn that showing their emotions will get them hurt. They learn that weakness is frowned upon, and that loving comes with the risk of being abandoned. So to survive, they build a shell. They become fiercely independent. They become good listeners, supportive, always strong, always okay. But what is behind that stability? Loneliness. The feeling of having to struggle to survive every day, being so tired that you don't know why. And the unfortunate thing is, because they appear to be okay, no one realizes that they need help. No one asks if they are tired. No one thinks that the person who always smiles, always helps others, is the one who is silently suffering the most. This is one of the greatest tragedies of souls who have been deeply wounded. They are so good at hiding it that the world believes that they are really okay. So when we start to look back at ourselves, when we ask, why do I always have to be strong? Why can't I rely on anyone? Why does every relationship make me afraid? It is not a sign of weakness. It is the beginning of recovery, the beginning of consciousness. When you understand that what you are living is not a nature, but a defense mechanism, you open yourself up to the possibility of transformation. There's no need to give up who you are. Just add understanding, add compassion to yourself. In what follows, I'll take you closer to 13 psychological traits common to people who have experienced deep wounds. Each trait is not only explained, but also linked to how to recognize it in real life, and how to begin to transform it from the inside out. This is not a list of self-criticism or blame. It's a map to help you understand the path you've been on, and the path you can take next, lighter, more conscious, and more whole. If you've ever wondered why you feel tired in situations where others feel comfortable, if you've ever withdrawn from relationships out of fear of being hurt, or if you've always been the one listening but never being heard, this next section can help you answer that question. This isn't a journey of analysis, it's a journey of return. And to return, we must first recognize how far we've strayed from ourselves. Now, let's begin. 1. The armor of independence. When strength becomes a burden, people who have suffered learn early on that it is dangerous to rely on others. They have trusted, and been betrayed, forgotten, or abandoned. And so they decide they will never need anyone again. They become the person everyone admires, independent, capable, handling everything. But what people call admiration to them is a burden, because behind that strong appearance is a soul that is exhausted. They do not dare to rely on anyone, for fear of falling. They do not share their fatigue, for fear of becoming a burden. And they do not allow themselves to be weak, because they do not know who will catch them if they fall. They are not strong because they like it, but because they once had no other choice. 2. Being too sensitive to the feelings of others, and the price of being too kind. They are the first to notice that the atmosphere in the room has changed. A small frown, a sigh, an unusual silence. They feel it all, not because they are divine, but because they had to do it to survive. They lived in an environment where other people's emotions were a warning signal. Is it safe today? Is someone angry today? Is someone about to leave? And from that they developed a special ability, always understanding others before understanding themselves. They help, listen, carry the load. But when night falls, they feel empty, because they have lived their whole life to please, to avoid conflict, to be accepted. They are the healers of everyone, except themselves. 3. Fear of intimacy. Love is where it hurts the most. When you love someone who has been hurt, don't be surprised if they are both close and distant. They love deeply, but always keep a certain distance. There is a part of them that is always hidden, not because they want to deceive, but because they are afraid of being seen through and hurt again. Every time you come close, a part of them will panic. They start to doubt, start to check, start to withdraw. Not because they don't trust you, but because their subconscious has never believed that a love can stay. The place that has been broken the most is the place that is the hardest to open. But if you are patient enough, and they are brave enough, the love here can be deeper than anywhere else. 4. People who are always fine, and the collapse in loneliness. There are people who always say, "I'm fine," even when they are in pain, when they fail, when they are about to collapse. They still say, "I'm fine." And the whole world believes it. No one asks more. No one doubts. But what no one knows is, at night, they cry alone. They put their heads on the pillow and don't dare to call anyone. Not because they don't have anyone, but because they don't know how to need anyone anymore. They were taught that emotions were weak. They were belittled for expressing pain. And they learned to get over it to survive. But gradually, the strength became a shell, so thick that they could not breathe. Perhaps what they needed most was not advice, but someone to sit quietly beside them and say, "Today, you don't need to fight anymore." 5. The body is always on alert, sensitive to sounds, Lights, crowds, a sudden car horn makes their heart beat faster. A cramped room makes them unable to breathe. A crowded party makes them exhausted, even though nothing happened. Such people are often considered too sensitive, too weak. But the truth is, their bodies are living in memories. At one time, they had to live in an environment where danger could happen at any time. And even though they are safe now, their nervous system still doesn't believe it. They are always in a defensive state, as if another incident is about to happen. This is not fragility. This is the result of a body that has had to struggle too many times to survive. 6. Need to control everything. Because they have been helpless for too long, they plan meticulously, arrange everything precisely, and hate sudden changes, not because they are hard-headed, but because they have lived through situations where things were out of their control. They have been helpless before someone's rage. They have been hurt when no one could control the chaos. And from then on, they vowed to themselves, "I will control everything so that I will never be hurt again." But control is also a cage. It makes them unable to relax. They cannot let things be. Every time they are uncertain, they panic. On the outside is neat. On the inside is a mind that never rests. And what they need to learn is not to let go of everything, but to let go little by little, to realize that not everything that goes wrong will always fall apart. 7. Silence. Not coldness, but the last refuge. People who have been deeply hurt often do not seek out sound, but seek out silence. Not because they hate talking, but because they have been exhausted from having to explain that they are okay. Silence is how they heal. A place where they don't have to act strong, don't have to smile politely, don't have to explain every thought to a world that always demands answers. For them, silence is where the soul is rearranged, not touched, not scrutinized, not urged to be better. But because of that, this silence can also become an isolating cocoon. They withdraw not because they hate someone, but because they no longer have the strength to endure another collision. The important thing is not to pull them out of silence, but to stand by them long enough for them to know that this time someone is waiting for them to return. 8. The locked heart, not because the place that once opened has been hurt the most. You can feel this in people who are always moderate in their emotions. They care, but never let you see that they need you. They love, but keep a part of themselves back. There is a wall, invisible but very real, separating them from the world. Not because they don't want to love, they really want to. But every time they open up, they are hurt. They believed someone would stay, then they left. They thought it was a healthy love, then it reminded them of the past. So they start living in a defense mechanism, analyzing every word, checking every little expression, being on guard for every sudden warmth. Love is no longer freedom for them, but a land of obstacles. And maybe what is necessary is not to force them to change, but to show them that this time, love is not a risk. It is a safe place. 9. Sensitive to injustice, because they were victims of silence. A person who has been hurt by injustice, being overlooked, ignored, abused, silenced, will develop a strong reaction to similar things in the present. They cannot stand injustice, even in the smallest situations. A contemptuous look, an overwhelming word, an indifferent indifference. Their reactions can be strong, even extreme, not because they want to cause trouble, but because they cannot let it happen again. They react not only to the present, but also to the child inside who was once unprotected. And so they become vocal, combative, sometimes too harsh, because for them fairness is no longer an option. It is the condition for them to not have to return to the feeling of powerlessness of the past. 10. Read what no one said. Because they had to survive by observing closely, there are people who always seem to know when you are not okay. Even when you smile, even when you say it's okay, even when you hide it, they still see. They don't do it out of curiosity, but because they used to be the ones who had to observe to guess other people's emotions, to avoid danger, to prepare for a shock, to respond in time. This ability over time becomes a kind of intuition. They don't need to hear you finish your sentence to understand that you are sad. They don't need you to cry to know that you are falling apart. But the sad thing is, they are very good at empathizing with others, but don't know what to do with their own pain. If only they had someone who did the same for them, reading their silence, seeing the weariness behind their tearless eyes. Sometimes healing begins not with speaking, but with someone noticing, without you having to say it. 11. Always feel like a burden, even when no one says so. If you have ever seen someone who always apologizes for small things, is always shy when sharing their feelings, or always tries to not bother anyone, chances are they have a deep belief that I am a burden. No one says it out loud, but they have felt it. Maybe from childhood, maybe from a relationship, maybe just from the eyes of someone who once sighed when they needed help. So they learn to withdraw, not daring to need, not daring to ask, always feeling like they have to compensate, to put on a front, to be useful, to be worthy of existence. And worst of all, when someone truly loves them, they don't believe it is true, because deep down they always think they will find me annoying, and they will leave. What they need is not to be convinced that they are valuable, but time, space, and a presence gentle enough for them to believe that just existing is enough. 12. Cherish every little thing. Because they have known what it is like to lose everything. The person who has fallen into the deepest pit is often the first to smile, because of the sunlight coming through the window. The person who says a sincere thank you, just because you make them a glass of water. The person who stops in the middle of a winter afternoon to watch a beautiful cloud. They do not romanticize life. They only know that there are things that once seemed so ordinary are actually very precious. Because they have lost everything, and when they come back, they no longer take anything for granted. They feel the value of peace, of a full meal, of a sleep without waking up. And even though life may still be unstable, they will still find a small reason to be grateful. Not because they are no longer in pain, but because they have learned that if they can still feel beauty, they are still alive. 13. Searching for meaning after pain. There's no return, so you have to move forward with a reason. Nobody wants pain, but once it's gone, they can't accept it becoming meaningless. So they start looking, finding a reason, a path, a way to turn the wound into something valuable. Some people write, some people help others, some people simply live with all their awareness and gratitude that they are still here. Not because they have forgotten the pain, but because they don't want to be controlled by it forever. Carl Jung called this process individuation, when a person is no longer a product of circumstances, but begins to live as themselves, with choice, with consciousness, with direction. And you know what? People who have suffered deeply, if they choose the path of transformation, are the deepest, kindest, and most resilient people, because they no longer have to prove anything. They just want to be real, and let what they have overcome be a light for someone who is still lost. Here are 13 signs, not to label yourself, but to let you know if you have these things in you, you have gone too far. And if someone you love has these signs, don't try to change them. Be there for them with patience and kindness, because you might be a part of their healing journey. After listening and recognizing each sign, a question may silently arise in your mind. Why didn't I realize it sooner? Why did it take me so many years to understand what I was carrying? How long have I been living with these wounds without knowing it? And the deeper question, how could I survive all this time without collapsing? The answer lies not in intelligence, but in the survival mechanism of the human soul. When we are too young to understand, or too weak to resist, our instincts will do the only thing they can: hide the pain so that we can continue to exist. Like a deep wound that cannot be stitched up, the body will numb the area to avoid feeling it. The same goes for the mind. It doesn't erase the memory, it just buries it deep down. We don't realize it, not because we are not sensitive enough. It's because we are too good at adapting. It's miraculous, but also heartbreaking. Some people grow up with excessive kindness, not knowing that it was born from the fear of being abandoned. Some people become strong in the eyes of the world, not knowing that the root is because they have never been allowed to be weak. Some people stick to silence, thinking that they are just introverts, not realizing that it is the only way to avoid being hurt anymore. The outside world often judges people by their behavior, but behavior is not always a choice. Sometimes it is the end result of hundreds of disappointments, thousands of times of having to overcome in solitude. And because we are so used to being strong, calm, and okay, we no longer see the signs of hurt in ourselves. Another reason we don't recognize it is because no one has ever taught us how to name our emotions. Since childhood, many of us have grown up hearing things like, "Don't cry. It's okay to be sad. Boys shouldn't be weak. Girls should be patient." These messages don't just block our emotions, they stifle our ability to listen to ourselves. So we grow up not knowing we're sad, only knowing we're tired, not knowing we're angry, only knowing we're emotionally turned off, not knowing we're hurting, only knowing we don't trust anyone anymore. And then there comes a time when our bodies start to wear out, our minds start to crack, or our relationships start to fall apart. We start to ask, something's wrong. That's the first step. That's the first awakening. And remember, it's better late than never. There are people who spend their whole lives never being able to name their pain. And if you're listening to these words, it means you've begun your journey back to yourself. Don't blame yourself for not realizing it sooner. You did the best you could to survive, with what you knew at the time. Realizing it now is not lateness, but a turning point. It is the first message of a new journey, a journey where you no longer have to continue to struggle to live the same way. We often think that to overcome trauma, we have to forget, to push it aside, to be strong. But the truth is, denial is not healing. Pain does not disappear just because we ignore it. It only goes deeper, quieter, and more dangerous, because when it is not seen, it will continue to control our lives from behind the scenes. Carl Jung once said, "Until you become conscious of what is controlling you, it will continue to control you, and you will call it fate." That is when we need to learn something extremely important that almost no one teaches us: to listen to pain, not to wallow in it, but to transform it. So how do we transform a wound that has been with us for years, decades? How do we let a part of ourselves no longer be controlled by fear? The first step is to recognize it without judgment. When an emotion arises, anger, sadness, jealousy, hurt, instead of blaming yourself, "Why am I like this?" Ask, where is this reaction coming from? Most strong reactions are an echo of something that has not been healed. Whenever you find yourself oversensitive, overreacting, having trouble understanding myself, don't scold yourself. See it as a door to a memory that needs you to go back to, not to live in it, but to embrace it and move through it. The second step is compassion with yourself. We are taught to be kind to others, but few are taught to be kind to ourselves. Self-compassion is not indulgence, nor is it justification. It is knowing how to look at yourself with the eyes of understanding. I did that because I didn't know any other way. When you are open enough to look at yourself in the past, not with blame, but with gratitude for having survived, the pain begins to melt away, not because it is gone, but because it no longer holds you captive. The third step, the most important, is conscious choice. When we see what has controlled us for so long, we can stop and ask, do I want to continue like this? Maybe you have always avoided love because you were afraid of being abandoned. Maybe you have always controlled because you were helpless. Maybe you have always tried to be okay because you were looked down upon when you expressed your feelings. But now you know, and knowing means you can choose. Choose to open up a little more. Choose not to respond immediately when you are angry. Choose to be silent, to listen to yourself before reacting. Choose to say, I am tired, instead of I am fine. You don't have to change your whole life overnight, but every conscious choice, no matter how small, is a shift. It's when the pain is no longer the driver. You, in all your maturity and compassion, are the one who decides the direction. The wonderful thing is when you begin to move into consciousness, old wounds are no longer something to hide. They become guides. They become compasses. They become proof that you've made it through the darkness, and there's still enough light to find your way. Transformation is not a destination. It's a journey. There will be days when you'll still fall. You'll still react with the same instincts. You'll still find yourself in the same old states, defensive, withdrawn, exhausted. But the difference is this time, you know why. And knowing why means you're no longer unconscious. You're starting to live differently, not because someone told you to, but because you deserve a lighter, deeper, more authentic life. A life no longer driven by old fears, but by a new love for oneself. One of the hardest things about living with trauma is the feeling of isolation, the feeling that you're the only one who feels this way, that you're the only one who's vulnerable, that no one else in the world really understands what you're going through. That loneliness doesn't come from not having people around you. It comes from believing that no one can reach your deepest parts. Trauma makes us withdraw. To protect ourselves, we build walls. But the more walls we build, the lonelier we become. And the lonelier we become, the more we believe that we're the problem. We begin to live as if our feelings are a nuisance. Sadness must be hidden. Weariness must be swallowed. Hurt must be let go if we want to be accepted. And so, day by day, we lose connection. But there's a quiet truth that few people speak. Your pain is not unique. You are not abnormal. You are not broken. And most importantly, you are not alone. There are many people out there who are carrying the same questions, the same feelings, the same pain in their hearts. When an old memory arises, they are also living without knowing who to rely on. They are also smiling in a crowd, but only feeling lost. They have also cried, just because someone said, I understand. We don't need someone perfect to heal. We need a real presence. Someone calm enough not to rush to fix things, deep enough to listen without judgment, and patient enough to stay. Sometimes just a look that doesn't leave, a gentle touch on the shoulder, a sincere question, How are you really feeling today is enough to start to heal the wound in your heart. If you are feeling tired, if you find that what has been said throughout this video touches a part of you, know that it doesn't make you weak. It just proves that your heart is still alive, that even though it is broken, it can still feel, and that is precious. No one should go through pain alone, but sometimes to be accompanied, we need to open a small door, not all the way. Just a little, a look, a word of truth. A dare to say, I'm not okay. Just that is enough for the connection to begin. And if you've come this far and listened to the last lines with me, I invite you to leave a small message in the comments. My pain has taught me a lot too, so that others will see that and know they're not alone. And so that you too will remember every step you're taking right now, however slow, however shaky, counts. There is a special moment in the healing journey, a moment that doesn't come with a loud bang, but often just a small question somewhere in the back of your mind. What now? You have looked back, understood, touched the parts you once hid, and now you stand on the border between the old, the pain that once controlled you, and the new, a different possibility of life that you never really entered. That question, what now, is not the end. It is the beginning of another journey, the journey of living with purpose. For those who have suffered a lot of trauma, just living is not enough. They no longer want to go through life mindlessly. They no longer want to wake up every day just to try to get by. Because after all, they know time is limited. They have lost many things, themselves, their faith, their years, and now what they crave most is not false peace, but true meaning. But living with purpose doesn't mean doing something grand. It doesn't mean writing a book, starting an organization, or changing the world. For a broken soul, purpose can be surprisingly simple. Listening to someone without interrupting, staying with someone who is hurting without offering advice, cooking a nice meal for someone you love, writing an honest line about yourself, even if it's just to yourself, helping someone through something you've been through. Meaning isn't about scale, it's about truth, it's about honesty, it's about choosing to live a little differently each day, no longer reacting, but choosing. No longer running away, but daring to face. No longer running away, but daring to face. No longer labeling yourself a victim, but starting to put your hand on the wound and ask, what do I want to do with this now? Pain, if kept in the dark, becomes pus. But if brought to light and cherished, it can become a source of light. Those who have gone through darkness and still have a kind heart, they have a very special light. Not blinding, but enough for others to see the way. You don't have to become a healer for the whole world. But if you start living from the most authentic place within yourself, you will become a support. Not by words, but by presence. Not by achievements, but by being there. And sometimes that is enough. Carl Jung called it individuation, the process of a person no longer living as a consequence of the past, but living as a free, conscious, responsible being. Anyone can start this process. No need to wait for permission. No need to wait for the pain to disappear. You just have to choose. Living with purpose is not living without pain, but knowing that the things that hurt you, if looked at directly, will show you what really matters. You fell, and you got back up. You were left behind, and you kept going. You were not listened to, and now you listen to yourself more clearly than ever. If you have come this far, if you have recognized, understood, transformed, connected, then the rest of the journey is no longer about living to overcome. It is about living to be, living to choose what is right for you, living because you know each next step is the most beautiful answer to the past. And from the deepest place, where there was darkness, now you are the one who lights the light.